Okay, it's 5:06. I want to call the December meeting of the Charleston, City of Charleston Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission to order. Let us begin with a moment of silence. There's so much happening in the world, violence. There are many things for us to be thankful for. And we are also definitely committed to the work outlined in the mission. So let us focus our minds and hearts on the work that's before us. Thank you. Are there any members of the public that signed up to address the body?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. I see no one present, so let's move on. You've received in the mail the minutes of the November 14th meeting. Are there additions or corrections to that from the review to be made? The second for, okay, note that.
Mike's, please, since I can't see who's moving and
Yeah.
seconding.
Carol, move for approval. Carol Jackson.
And Brandon, move for second.
Thank you.
The one slight change under number 7, where it says Co-Chair Harris indicated that Hark had to present an annual report. Not necessarily due in September, but we had to prepare an annual report. So I would remove in December from that, from the minutes.
Okay, I'll make the motion as amended.
Okay. All right, so the motion on the floor is to adopt the minutes of November 14th meeting as amended. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And any abstentions, so ordered. Let's defer the chairman's comments to that for our presentation. On the Charleston water system, I'll turn to Commissioner Tom for introduction on this item.
Yes, I'm going to tell you all a little bit about Mr. Baker Mordecai, and then I'm going to have Mr. Mordecai introduce Mike. Saya, is that?
Tell us why it happened.
And they are here from the water treatment, Charleston Water Treatment Service, and they're going to talk to us about the lead pipe situation. Mr. Mordecai has been with the CWS since 2006, and he was recommended to us by Councilman Waring, who is the city council representative to the Charleston water system. And Councilman Waring says that Mr. Mordecai is a very caring and serving to the public, and he has a sense of urgency attacking the problems. So, and I'm sure this is one of the top problems possibly that the water system is facing. So without further ado, Mr. Mordecai, thank you very much for coming.
Well, thanks, Tom. That was a great introduction, more than I think I deserve, but I really appreciate the opportunity and to talk about our lead service line replacement program, and thank all the members here of the committee for inviting us. Next slide. Or do I do that? Oh, okay. It's probably better if I. So I'm going to start by telling you that our drinking water is safe to drink. We have 2 water sources, the Edisto River and the Bushy Park Reservoir, and both the sources do not have lead in it. And when we treat the water, what's leaving our plant and entering the distribution system is lead-free. And what we do before it goes into the distribution system is we reduce the corrosiveness of the water by making it scale forming. And that is done through the addition of orthophosphate. Orthophosphate is a FDA-approved food additive. It's been used for many, many years in the industry. And then we also control the pH. We increase the pH from just around 7 to around 8.5. We use lime to do that. The orthophosphate scale that forms on the surface of the pipe is protective of the pipe, and it prevents lead from leaching into the water. And the scale keeps our lead levels below the EPA action level. So just to explain this a little bit more, we began feeding orthophosphate in October of 1992. We've been feeding it for about 30 years now, a little over 30 years. And you can see after we initiated the addition, it took a few years for the scale to form. And then we've been below the action levels for that entire period. What you'll see on the far right is EPA proposed new action levels and a new protocol for sampling. And we decided, even though that doesn't become effective until 2027, to go ahead and implement that protocol just to see where we stood. And you can see we're below the new proposed action level of 10 parts per billion. And the new protocol requires that we only test for in residences that have 100% lead serving them. So it'd be a worst case scenario. So I'm going to give you a little regulatory background. The lead and copper rule was published in 1991. And then we went almost 30 years with nothing. And, but Flint, Michigan occurred in 2018. And that was a real fiasco. And that was the impetus for the lead and copper rule revisions. And that was published on January 15th, 2021. When they published that, they had something called a trigger level and an action level, and it was totally confusing. It's almost impossible to interpret. And so under an executive order, EPA went in and they saw some opportunities to improve it, and that culminated in the lead and copper rule improvements, LCRI, that was first announced on November the 30th. Final LCRI was just published just about a little less than 2 months ago. And the compliance deadline is 3 years after publication, which makes the compliance deadline on November 1st, 2027. So what does the LCR require? There's 5 key rule provisions: achieving 100% lead service line replacement within 10 years, locating legacy lead pipes, improving tap sampling, lower the lead action level, and then strengthening protections to reduce exposure. I'm going to be really focused today on the first bullet, because that's the one that really is very costly and requires a tremendous amount of work. And the first thing I'll tell you is that that requirement is independent of how good you're treating the water. Even though you're below the action level, EPA has stated that any lead exposure is not good. And so that's why that's in the regulation. The 10 years doesn't take effect until the compliance date, which I mentioned earlier was in 2027. So really, basically, we have 13 years to remove the lead service lines in the system. So let's talk a little bit about what is a lead service line.
Yeah.
Just in case you all may not know, most of you probably do. But you see the water meter. The water meter is how we bill, and that's located actually on the property line. On the inside of the water meter, all the way to the building inlet, that's the customer side of the service line. And from the water main, where the tap is, all the way to the meter is Charleston Water System service line. When, I'll give you just relative kind of diameters. Typically, the customer service line is about 1/2 to 1 inch. The Charleston line is typically 1 to 2 inches. The water main are almost greater than 2 inches. And we've never had used lead for any line that's greater than 2 inches. So none of our water mains have lead. The Charleston Water System service lines, if it was constructed before the end of 1931, so anything before 1932, it's lead. That was the predominant material that was used. We stopped using lead after that period. The customer service line, if we have our line was lead, since it was a predominant material, in all likelihood, the service line is also lead. So we have a lot of historical buildings here. We have, if you ever look at our inventory map, which we might have time to show you, that's where the preponderance of the lead services are located. I do want to mention that sometimes where that water meter is, there's a master meter. So it serves like a big development beyond that. Our lines serving those master meters are lead-free because they're greater than 2 inches. So why are we doing the lead service line replacement? You know, first, it's a common source of lead in drinking water. As I mentioned before, EPA's position is that any lead exposure is bad. It is required by EPA within 10 years of the compliance. And we have gone through and painfully reviewed all of our tap cards, and we've identified that we have 6,400 lead service lines in our system. Okay. We have 123,000 total lines, so it represents roughly about 5% of the lines in our system. And most of these obviously are in the older areas of Charleston, Cosgrove Avenue to the Battery. So why now? You know, one thing we've learned about federal funding is you want to be first to the trough. And we decided, since we had our inventory completed, that we would go ahead and apply for a state revolving fund grant. This all stems from the federal funding that was provided as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law several years ago. And so what we've done, we were able to get 34 million. Half of that is a loan, half of it's forgiven to replacing 1,100 lead service lines. So some of the eligibility requirements is that 7% of the work had to be in disadvantaged areas. And what we decided to do is we would do 100% of the work in disadvantaged areas. The disadvantage criteria, and I'll go into this a little bit more, was that it must include areas that are below the median household income. So the other requirements are that you had to have your lead service line inventory completed. Very few utilities have that done. But we started this effort in 2016, and we went through all 123,000 tap cards, and we mapped them on our system. And we actually completed our lead inventory last year. The other thing, the other requirement is you couldn't just replace the public side of the lead service. You also had to replace the customer side. So we call that full service line replacement. And then finally, all the projects must comply with some of the federal funding requirements that you typically see, which is Build America, Buy America, Davis-Bacon wages, which is your minimum wage, and then meeting the federal requirements for disadvantaged business enterprises, including best management practices to go out and solicit disadvantaged businesses to perform the work. So elaborate a little bit more on the project area. We did look at, we used census tracts to determine where we were below the median income. We used the Census Bureau data. The median household income for the state was $58,000, and we found 7 census tracts that were below that. And we do have all the project addresses available. We'd be glad to give that to you if you're interested. And then for the timeline, we've already completed the preliminary engineering report for this work, and we're into the actual design, and the start of the work is planned for the second quarter of next year, and we hope to complete it about a year later.
And that's the 1,100 you're talking about?
That's the 1,100. We'll only have 5,500 after that,
Right.
or 5,000.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn this over to Mike, because he has a good handle on our outreach, but this is where we may need some of your assistance. In the state of South Carolina, you can't just go onto private property and do work. And it's really important that we obtain customer permission for these 1,100 services before we can finalize the design. And Mike, I'm going to let you speak a little bit more, because Mike's done a tremendous amount of outreach on this.
Thank you, Baker. What we're talking about here, it's important to realize that, there's the EPA rule, and then there's our fulfillment of this loan/forgiveness grant. And that's what we're really talking about here, those 1,100 service lines. And so for the last year or so, we've been preparing to fulfill this grant. And that really starts with a lot of community outreach and interaction. So I went out to somewhere between 15 to 20 HOA meetings, community association meetings, and I talked about the program. We had to do a lot of investigative digging to identify service lines for some other projects. And I got to interact with a lot of people face to face. And what I found was the overwhelming response was basically, I'm not worried. You tell me we're safe because of your lead data, your orthophosphate lining a lot. You can see a little orthophosphate scale inside the pipe, keeping the people safe. People were more concerned about damage to their sidewalk. Maybe we're going to, their sidewalk might be older and you're going to put a brand new white block in the middle of the nice old aged tan ones, or we might dig up a favorite plant. That's what people's concerns were based on that. I ran into a woman who was about to give birth, the biggest belly you'd ever seen in the world, and she was worried about a little wall that we might have to undermine, sending the line through, and she had no concerns about health. In fact, we had not one single concern about public health from lead, because people believe the Charleston water system does a good job with coating the lines. But the challenge we have with this grant, this loan, is that we need the customers to either opt in or opt out. And that means the homeowner. I said customer, that's wrong. We need the homeowner to opt in or out. You have a lot of situations where you have Airbnbs, you have landlords, and a lot of those folks we know from property records are not based here in Charleston. And I don't own an Airbnb, but I imagine I wouldn't want my property taken out of service or use for a week or so when we did a construction project in it. So there's challenges with people aren't local. There's people who rent a lot of properties. They don't live there. They don't have a health investment stake in it themselves because they don't reside there. They don't drink the water from that property. And so our biggest challenge with this program is going to be those consent letters. And, we hope that the homeowner would want us to do the private side. If they sign a piece of paper that says we can, then we can include it as part of those first 1,100. But if they don't respond in any way, we can't do any work with the grant money. Now, they can also opt out. They can also sign the waiver that says, no, I do not want any work done on my private property. That allows us to use that loan money to come in and do the work on the public side. That's from the water main to the water meter and move on. But the unfortunate thing is there's a good chance that this might be the only chance to get free money to do the private side. Because once that homeowner now signs that piece of paper, and we fulfill this whole program and we end it, there may be other funds in the future, but there may not. And our board does not feel that we should use ratepayer funds to do private plumbing work. And that makes really good sense. And so where we can, we will, with third-party money, state and federal money, we will. But this is our opportunity. I know Baker's going to talk about that a little more, but we hope as we move forward into the beginning of this coming year that we can form partnerships to help us get to persuade people and contact these homeowners and talk to them about the importance of changing out this lead line, because it's not just for you and your tenants. It's not for today. It's for generations and generations to come. So whatever we can do, whatever assistance we can get from any partner we can get, we certainly welcome it to help us get the word out about simply signing a form and letting us come in and doing this work. You might have seen on another slide, there was a 100% free. There's no cost to the homeowner. There's no cost at all. This is an opportunity to have it done for free. Your yard will be fully restored to original condition. We just need community to participate, because this is for now and it's for the future. And that's pretty much what I wanted to share. I get one slide and that's what I have. So I give it back to Baker. Thank you.
Mike did a great job. I was going to say we've had a public meeting. We have reached out to the HOAs. One of the things that we're going to do is be sending out a letter. We have the homeowner addresses from Charleston County. We'll send out a letter to each individual homeowner. And we'll try to continue to work our outreach as much as we can to see, make sure we get these signatures. We'd like to have them completed really by the end of the first quarter next year before the design is finalized. So I'm going to talk a little bit just to follow up with what Mike said, is what does the work entail? Because that's the number one question that we get. And, there's not an easy way to do this. So what we typically do is there's technology, it's called directional bore. And what you do is you put a pit right where the tap is to the water main, and a pit on each side of the meter, and then a pit at the building inlet. And you pull the new copper pipe through those pits. And you can imagine, the cost for each individual service line replacement is $30,000. The EPA estimated $8,000 to $10,000. We think they haven't lived in the real world, unfortunately, not even close. The biggest cost associated with this is actually the restoration work. It's not the getting the lines through. It's the restoration work, especially in the historic area of downtown. Our approach is pretty simple. We'll do this block by block, and until we get them all done. And so with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions you might have.
Questions from the commissioners? Go ahead, Tom.
Ironically, I was just at a neighborhood association meeting and talking about different issues. And a couple of the folks said, I just got a letter. What's in the letter to get them to
Okay.
take action?
So those letters are not related to the lead service line replacement. As part of the LCRI, and actually previously the LCRR, we had to notify every customer of ours that had suspected lead, known lead, or unknown.
Wow.
That's 70,000 customers that we had to notify. And that includes the 6,400 that have known lead. We expected the avalanche of calls, and we understand the angst associated with our customers receiving this letter. We had to use an EPA template that had some very strong language about the health effects of any lead exposure at all ages. And so what we did to prepare for it is, as people call in, kind of go through some of the points we just made here today with our lead results, but we offer to do testing for free. And what we're finding is that that goes a long way to easing the angst. And we have a process for folks to either have sample bottles delivered or they can pick them up themselves. We've, just so you know, we've sampled probably about 300 so far, which is a very small percentage of the 70,000 letters that went out. All of them, 98% of the sample results are below 1 part per billion, because we're including unknown services that we may not have lead. And the highest reading we got is 5.7 parts per billion. So, you know, but if a test goes to alleviate the concern, that's really what we would encourage. But that's a great question.
So are you starting out by doing, you know, like some pilot neighborhoods that you would then be able to use as your success or learning lab stories for the rest of your 1,100?
So we have a lot of experience doing this already.
Yeah.
As a matter of policy, if we go in and we replace a main line and it's got lead service lines attached to it,
Right.
it's crazy to dig up a street and not do the lead service lines.
Sure.
And so we've done a phenomenal amount of work just in the last 5 years on this to whittle the list down to the 6,400. And we also know what the contractors are charging.
Right.
And that's where our estimates come from. And we'd rather overshoot it than undershoot it since we're using grant money. And we believe that we have the experience and the wherewithal to do it. So.
I mean, I read a couple stories in the paper, I think, and, you know, I think people always learn by the experience of others. So as much as you could have testimonials from the neighborhoods that you've already done or made any sort of changes to, if the main concern is what will my yard look like when you're done, I would think people would be able to tell that story, you know, on your behalf.
That is, that's the number one concern. And we've had very few complaints. And I don't know if it's hard to get residents to come out and say that, but I agree with you that, you know, people's own testimony goes a long way to furthering that. But, you know, the directional bore method, we try to preserve plants, sidewalks. I mean, it's not, we don't want to dig it up.
Sure.
That would be the wrong approach. And so I'll tell you that every single lead service line that we remove is an individual design.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to consider what the different hardscape challenges would be associated with that lead service line removal. Yeah. And the design is a very expensive proposition and very timely as well.
Yeah.
How long will people have to be out of their house if they will, and without water if they won't?
They will not have to be out of their houses at all. And we typically, I mean, the whole work takes a few hours, okay? And we'll obviously work with the homeowners to make sure that we've scheduled it with them and they're aware of what's going on. There are some protocols that we have to follow with regard to sampling the water before we do the work and sampling it after we do the work. And the protocol requires sampling the first liter and the 5th liter. And I don't want to confuse anybody, but the first liter picks up what's in the customer service line. and the fifth leader picks up what's in the Charleston water system service line. And so you want to take the higher of the two is what your action level is based on. And we want to make sure that before we leave that we've given folks the right. And we also have some what we call Brita cartridges. It removes the lead that we will leave with the homeowner as we're doing the work.
So it comes out of the tap. you mean?
Yeah, so it comes out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have two questions. One really has very little to do with the presentation, but I'm just interested, and the other one, maybe. You mentioned the sources of water for the Charleston water system are the Edisto River and Bushy Park, and so I'm assuming Bushy Park, Upper Cooper River.
Yes. The
Um,
reservoir there.
A reservoir there. Okay, where do we tap the Edisto River?
It's at Givens Ferry State Park. That's where our main intake is. And then the water travels several miles via deep tunnel to our water treatment plant.
Great. Okay, for me, years down the road, potentially that's an issue related to studies that are saying, all this hubbub about Google and other server farms and depleting groundwater, and
Mhm.
also groundwater depletion has been fingered by some people as a potential alternate cause of sea level rise, which
Right.
I guess in the future, we'll see whether that's true or not. Second question. You mentioned the replacing the lines, and you talked about the pick and pulling copper lines.
Mhm.
The replacement lines are going to be copper, is that correct? Is that what?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And not plastic, because of course now there's a lot of work.
Well,
People saying
I know.
microplastics are problems. We found
keep
it.
on going from one material to
Yeah.
the next, but our plan right now is to use plastic. I'm sorry, copper.
Copper,
Copper.
okay.
Don't
Right.
get me
Okay, good.
confused.
Because I know internally in my home, it's all, pretty much
Right.
all plastic,
Yeah.
some plastic
Yeah,
dri-
in
or
the
plastic,
70s,
so,
They were doing plastic.
Yeah.
right, so, okay, thank you.
Very good.
I've got a couple of questions. Back in, well, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, there was a lot of commercial land, particularly gas stations that had fuel tanks that leaked and polluted the property. And it became impossible to sell until they came up with Superfund money to ameliorate the issues. And I see this as kind of an equivalent. And it occurs to me that perhaps if you're going to people and saying there might be lead or there is lead pipe on your property, if you don't want it to be fixed at no cost to you, then we're going to have to record it on your deed through the RNC. And when you go to sell it, you might have some issues, just because that's a public safety issue. And I
think
commend
the-
you on your water treatment so that it's not an issue
Yeah.
from a safety health
Yeah.
perspective. I think the EPA is overreaching here. But that is an expense that would be nice to not have to go through after this is all done.
I
Which
think
is
you've
another
made
thing
a
to point
great
out.
case for the opt-in
Yes,
form,
Right.
because I believe there will be a requirement in the future that a homeowner would have to disclose what the service line is on their property.
well, just like lead paint,
And
yes.
that would impact the housing cost. And that's why I think it's important that we try to get the word out as best we can and get as many people to opt in as we can.
I
And
just-
these are a lot of folks that are in this area. Some of them, I will tell you, we're looking at median value. So there are some really nice big homes there in this area. But a lot of them would never be able to afford this. And so we certainly hope they take advantage of it.
Exactly, and because it will, I'm sure, come back to haunt them if they don't. The other thing I wanted to go back to was there was a percentage requirement of disadvantaged housing. And you're going with 100% focus there, but I'm assuming that we want to get everything done eventually outside of the disadvantaged housing. So will the 100% that you're focusing on first as a priority,
Mhm.
will we get credit for that down the road towards the 67%. That's all they're requiring, because I don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot and not get the other homes done because we've only focused on the money.
Right. Yeah, so the LCRI, there's no requirement that we replace private side lead service lines. There is a requirement that we notify the homeowner when we're replacing the public side, and we have to notify them, and I don't know who comes up with this stuff, just so you know, but we have to notify them 4 different times using 2 different methods. And at that point, if they don't respond, we can go ahead and just replace the public side. If they don't, if they do respond, currently, they would need to pay for the private side. Where there's federal money involved, that is the federal strength. That is a federal requirement that we replace the whole service line. So what we figured is, and I'll just tell you this, that we usurped about 90% of the state's budget doing this. So we thought about just going outside and doing more, but you know, really we couldn't have gone any higher. Obviously, we had a lot of discussions with the state as to how high we could go, and this is pretty much where they drew the line. And we thought, if you're going to draw the line there, we're going to do 100% of the disadvantaged areas.
It's great.
Right, but that's federal money.
Yeah, that's right.
So-
Federal money.
If we go back to the well, as it were,
Yeah.
down the road, and they've said 67%, and we've used up our 67% there, we should still hopefully get credit.
You're talking about spreading it out.
Bingo, exactly.
Yeah.
So that down the road, once those are taken care of, we can still get credit for that. But we've already done our 67%, so this rest, you still got to give us money for, is what I'm driving at.
I'll just say that's probably a board decision, because we really wanted to tackle this disadvantaged areas. These are economically disadvantaged areas. When you start going and doing private work on a house on the battery and you're paying for it,
Right.
it's not very well received. And we have not decided to make that type of investment,
Yeah.
nor are we required to from a regulatory standpoint. So what you're really talking about is what's the board's policy on this? And currently our policy is wherever we can get federal money, we're going to do it. And if we can't get federal money, it'll be the private property owner's responsibility.
Well, you're living into our equity mission. I mean, really.
Additional questions? So we didn't set up the conversation because it probably was unnecessary, given the excellent job that the system is doing, maintaining low levels of lead in the water. But as a public health question, lead is a significant issue, given the age of the city. It is something that it should be attended to, and it's good that we're out front. I think, Carol, you pointed out the fact that are focused on our charge dealing with making certain that historic situations of disparity
Yeah,
are addressed,
disparities.
seems to be being addressed by this. And part of the reason that we asked this presentation, we're not certain after seeing newspaper reports, right? The general public are talking about this and understand, one, the quality, water quality already, and how this prophylactic is important in terms of the future. And it is an opportunity for folks to improve the value of their property and protect that. Question on your procurement side, where are you in that process?
Well, we have a designer on board. They've done the PER, and then the next step is once we finalize the plans and specs, we will have to go back to the funding managers, both at DES and the SCRIA, and we will have to, then go for a loan. And this is a loan, it's 50% principal forgiveness, and then 50% we've already budgeted for our portion. And the loan is a low interest loan, so it's very favorable to us.
The other
And
component.
we hope to do that first quarter next year.
Yeah. So the number of units to be done, how do you select, what's the process for contractors getting on your bid list, and being able to get some of the work done? Is it
We-
one major contractor, several? How's that work?
Yeah, so I don't know if I can answer the specifics, but I can tell you there's a lot of federal guidance on how to do this. And we have done it before. We do have some experience with other federal dollars that we've used. There are a number of best management practices that are outlined in the federal guidelines, and we will follow those best management practices.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
I think it's been instructive. And
Very
we
good.
appreciate the time.
Well, thanks again for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I think I would propose that, I don't know if we have to take a vote or whatever, but I think we should send a note of congratulations, or however we want to pose it, back to the board through these gentlemen, so that they know that we appreciate their priority of working with the disadvantaged communities first, and maybe only.
All right, so you want to phrase that in the form of motion so that Jasmine can capture it for the minutes?
Okay, I move that we vote to send a word of thanks for the way that the plan is being structured to work first with the disadvantaged communities that have been identified through their inventory.
Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Brandon. Discussion?
I'm thinking it might be more useful if we provided an endorsement to their paperwork or whatever it is they're filing in January. I'm assuming that they're requesting for money, and if we provide an official endorsement to that request, it might be more useful. Just a thought.
Perhaps the difficulty with that is that will not have seen the specifics. Perhaps the letter would be included, our comments would be included in the package and moving it forward, but absent having reviewed it, I don't think it's appropriate. And I don't think we have the technical ability, to do that. Okay, all right. On the motion to communicate with the commissioners of the water system, congratulate them on success and urging them to move forward with this.
And their prioritization.
And
I think
the
that's
priority, and
the
the
key.
priorities that they've established inside of that.
Right.
All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? So ordered. Okay. As I indicated earlier, Adrian, unfortunately, his daughter is at the hospital. That's why she's not here. She did circulate, based on our conversation in our last meeting, to begin the process of developing the annual report, which is
Right.
also kind of a 3-year, also needs to serve partially as a 3-year component. Her initial draft focuses primarily on 2024. There is some information about some of the things that happened beforehand. So there's obviously a little bit of work to be done there. And I don't believe she circulated any additional comments. I guess she did indicate that she is still attempting to schedule the meeting with planning, legal, to discuss the bar amendments, trying to get that on the schedule. She's being active in that.
In
space.
January.
In January. So those are the two major pieces. But on the draft that you've received, general comments, all right, and then let's come up with a process by which we can give her feedback in a practical way, whether it's, using the Google Docs and making suggestions, and then perhaps if there's one other commissioner who would like to join Stephen and I in reviewing the document before we bring it back to us in January, I'd appreciate that as well.
I had a few history comments I wanted to contribute to it. Particularly, I think the Black Wall Street plaques needs to be in there.
Yeah, good.
Because I think we contributed significantly to that this year, but there's still going to be more to do in the future in helping them get those plaques put out. And I've already committed to it. I think everybody else has too. That's just a small part. And I thought what was done with the Palestinian and Hebrew community didn't get enough. I thought that was huge, and it was mentioned, but I thought it was a pretty big deal.
The draft?
I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to look
Okay.
at it when it arrived this morning.
Okay. All right, so, a couple of things. One, doing, a report in a PowerPoint format does not really allow you to tell the story, all right?
Right.
And so, I think perhaps it may, getting a PowerPoint, which is, a good presentation, something that council, could accept and hear and understand.
Executive
is one
summary.
thing. We may need to, perhaps have a couple of vignettes, stories, all right, that we would also circulate, in addition as a supplement to it. But this presentation was kind of along the lines, basically what we've done in the past, anticipating a presentation before the city council. You get 5 minutes to say what you got to say.
Right.
It won't allow you to tell the story. So, if there are pieces like that, and, if individual commissioners feel so moved to write up a one-pager that we could use as a supplement on those items, I think that would be a good thing. My suggestion again is, I believe the document is in Google Drive. If it's not, we'll ask her to put it there. And we can each go in and make suggestions in terms of the sections, and the like, that'll enable her to, make an adjustment, edits, if you will. And I think we need a small working group, to look at her edits before it comes back here, because I hate to be in a situation where we were trying to edit a document in one of our meetings. Is there anyone who'd be willing to be part of that review?
I can help with that.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Okay, so, the process will be, get your comments, to Adrian, before,
Christmas.
December 25th, okay? And then right after the new year, we'll have, her redraft. Bonnie, Stephen, and I will take a look at that, and then, have something circulated to the group,
Great.
at our January meeting, okay? Moving on to bar amendments, already made comment on that. I guess another component of her report would have been around the Human Affairs Council proposal. She did report that she had reached out to the folks in Myrtle Beach, I believe it was, and described their model. Had not reached out to Greenville. During our last discussions, Stephen and I and Adrian, I had asked her for a recommendation. We have the document, the MOU, what aspects of it. I think legal had an opportunity to look at that. Is there any comment from legal on? Okay, so it would be very helpful to us if we could get whatever those comments are. Okay, so we need to get those, and again, looking for a recommendation in the form of resolution that we would, include in Adrian's draft of the report. There's a section that has recommendations, but she doesn't have any recommendations. All right, the Human Relations Council Commission piece would be, yes or no, whether or not we're proposing that is an example of something that might be there. Another is whether or not we're, considering, recommending changes in the manner in which commissioners are appointed, and things of that nature. So, again, in terms of your comments, both the programmatic and historical context are important, but any recommendation that you think should be included in that section would be important for us to have as well.
Well, and can we plan that we would actually take action in January, whether we're gonna be a no or,
That's
No-go?
my
Okay.
intention, to have
Okay.
a recommendation, a proposal that would be included in our, recommendation to the mayor and council regarding that.
good?
Other subcommittee updates. History?
Well, I just mentioned the one that I thought needed to be in our report. It's also come to my attention, and I'm sure you all know who Philip Simmons was, and his blacksmith shop is well protected, but apparently the adjoining property of his house is fallen into basically demolition by neglect. And I wanted to pursue that with Adrienne. I'll just do that as a sidebar because I think she's got some contacts that we can leverage. Other than that, I've been in contact with the city's history commission and got a good working relationship, I think, going with two of the members there. I haven't met the chairman yet, but they had a lot of interest in the Black Wall Street effort and thought it was a great program and something that the actual history commission might want to be also putting their stamp of approval on.
Who is their chairman now?
I don't know his name. It's David McCormick and Dale Dealing are the two gentlemen I've been speaking with that are members of the commission. I know he's a history professor at the Citadel. Beyond that, I don't know who he is.
Brandon, anything new on the dialogue? All right. You've been tracking conversations. Is there continued angst, anxiety, concern in any of the communities around the issues related to house signing?
I have been, and I've attempted. I know that there was a demonstration in the city over Black Friday, and there were social media posts that indicated that there were some complaints about City of Charleston Police Department. I tried to follow up with the group to suss out what might be some specifics that they experienced that they might want to share. But I didn't receive a response. So maybe it could be that I'm not the best person to gather that information from them, but I'll be interested in hearing more about what their specific complaints were. My understanding is their demonstration involved a caravan of cars that went through downtown Charleston with signs and flags and something to that effect. And they complained they complained about being treated unfairly. So I'll be curious to find out more about what those complaints were specifically. And yeah, but other than that, I haven't heard a whole lot, except that I'm happy to share that I've got news today that the President Biden released the White House's first ever comprehensive strategy to combat Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate. And it is a comprehensive strategy in that it addresses that issue at all levels of government. It mirrors a strategy that was released to combat anti-Semitism about a year ago. And I think I have not been able to review it myself yet, but it is being disseminated to groups throughout South Carolina through the Interfaith Partners of South Carolina and the U.S. Department of Justice. So it might be worth checking out because there could be, even though administration is changing, there could be some lessons to take from that document that could be applicable to the city as well.
Thank you for that. I think it, perhaps since we haven't been able to convene conversation, or maybe the situation is such that there's not a lot of public conversation going on, perhaps taking a look at the guidelines previously issued about anti-Semitic behavior and Islamophobic behavior, all right, and having a conversation about what implications that has would be a good substantive piece. What can we take from this and move forward here, as opposed to just generally how you're feeling? So that might be a new direction for us to take with that work.
I just add.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and I think it was the same. There was a simultaneous call to address both anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate, and I think both reports came from that original call, and I would imagine they mirror each other in a lot of ways. I will add locally, that this past Saturday, the Central Mosque of Charleston hosted, or this past Sunday, they hosted a sacred space tour in partnership with the Charleston Interreligious Council. I heard it was successful. I wasn't able to make it, unfortunately, this time. But January is Interfaith Harmony Month. And traditionally, the Interreligious Council there's been a proclamation issued by the mayor at City Council. This year, there's a proclamation that the Interreligious Council is asking the mayor of Charleston, Mount Pleasant, and North Charleston to sign. And there will be a program at North Charleston City Hall in the lobby on January 2nd where Interfaith Harmony Month will be announced, and a schedule will be shared about events going on throughout the month to promote interfaith harmony between all the different religious groups in the Charleston area. The only other, one more addition.
You had nothing to say.
There's a new mosque that's opened in Berkeley County, in Goose Creek. They have a growing Muslim community in Berkeley County, and the mosque is apparently really flourishing. It was actually an imam that used to be the imam of the Central Mosque of Charleston that opened up a mosque out there in Goose Creek, and they already have a huge congregation from what I understand. So it's a growing community in our area.
So, you raised the question of, resolutions or proclamations. January, February, March, are, traditional, are very heavy with, commemorative, events, trying to have us recall, the relationships between, or the absence of relationships between folks. On January 1st, the Emancipation Proclamation Parade, I think this is the 159th year of that is occurring. Appropriate for some recognition by the city of that event. Then you have the YWCA, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King celebration. City is traditionally a sponsor of that. And then again, not in talking to people who have been involved with securing resolutions from the city in the past, given the change in administration, they're not sure how that happens. Perhaps we should direct Adrian to inquire as to whether those kind of requests have been made to make certain that they are issued. I'll also note that that's true. That is true. That is true. That's true. That's another approach. That's absolutely. But again, if something's already in the work, it would be good to not have to ask folks to do stuff. And I guess the other thing I'd note is that 2025 marks the 110th anniversary of the founding of ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. February is Black History Month. It would be appropriate to do something around that. 2025 is the 160th anniversary of the founding of the Avery Institute. Again, another significance. And as already, well, not here in another meeting, it was mentioned, in fact, it's the 10th anniversary of the massacre at Mother Emanuel, right? And I'm certain that we'll be all involved. But again, these are all situations where the public body should acknowledge that. And we as a Human Affairs and Racial Conciliation Commission should have our voices spoken up to make sure that that's happening, even though we won't be the ones issuing those proclamations.
Do you think that we might be interested? I know that Mother Emanuel's Memorial Foundation has been developing an outreach program that is centered around education as it relates to racism, discrimination, and healing together as a society. And I've been privy to some of the meetings where they've been drafting their curriculum, and I'm sure I know they'll be launching it early 2025. Do you think we would be interested in hearing a presentation from Mother Emanuel about?
Certainly.
Awesome.
So, I mean, in my email or the someday next week is Human Relations Healing Day, National Human Relations Healing Day. And I'm embarrassed to say that I don't have the information to provide to us, but we should make an effort to get that word out and have folks participate. The individual organizations are having events and activities around racial healing, and that would be good for us to participate. You know, understand that's the kind, I guess, in the current climate, accurate information, timely information gotten to people so they can make their decision about whether or not they're interested in participating in those kind of activities. Because, well, it's just important to get that out. Perhaps that's an important role for us. Want to update folks on, and I was hoping Stephen would be here, the rapid housing proposal that was not moved forward at the last community development meeting will be heard again or with amendments on December 17th, sometime in the afternoon next week, prior to the city council meeting. That's at least that was announced at the last city council meeting.
So at the CD committee, they're gonna have a special meeting?
The CD committee is going to have a meeting to review the modified version of the proposal. If you looked at a couple city council meetings ago, the mayor,
The third, there was one on
yeah,
the third.
the mayor indicated that he had gotten a considerable amount of feedback and he was going to bring back a proposal. He was anxious to see that the Charleston City Council take action in 2024. Therefore providing leadership to the other municipalities in the area. So I believe sometime in the I don't know if it's late morning or afternoon on the 17th, because there's also a city council meeting that day.
So this is for the Community Development Committee or the full council?
The city council, the community development committee in the afternoon, followed by the city council meeting,
Right, okay.
the regular city council meeting, where he's hoping that there'll be action on that proposal. I attended the CPAC meeting, the 10th.
17th, sometime around there.
Number of interesting issues, questions of the Community Police Advisory Committee's responsibility as it relates to reviewing complaints after the fact on a kind of an annual basis. Was being discussed with the possibility of some recommendations going to city council
I mean, you
to
can watch
amend
it on
their
YouTube.
guidelines. The police department has decided to undertake development of their strategic plan, and having Jill Easton, who is their director of research, lead that, rather than having an external consultant. The department indicated at the meeting that community stakeholders would be involved in the process, but it's still to be developed, and perhaps that's something that we can ask Adrian when she meets with Jillian to be able to provide some more information to us in terms of how we communicate out to the community who are stakeholders, how they're being involved in that process. And the department is up for fully recertification by the Council on Law Enforcement Administration. It's a certification process that will happen during 2025. And there may be the opportunity for community engagement around that. So that's what I've got on police. Okay. Carol?
No, I don't really have anything. We're tracking the rapid rehousing reprise, but I haven't seen any revised document yet. So I guess that'll be out like it normally is. Should be out today. Should be out today before the council meeting.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
Bef-
if it's gonna be.
Before we go,
need to vote.
before I have a motion to adjourn, are there
I'm
any
sure
comments
ask
for the
them to
good,
vote to recommend it and then vote
comments for the
once
good of the order?
we Get it.
Yes, sir. Couple updates from the Jewish community. This Sunday, our organization, the Jewish Federation, is having our annual meeting. It's our 75th anniversary of being in existence. And my CEO, who has served for 18 years, is retiring, and this is her farewell event. And we're welcoming a new CEO who's been hired we moving here from Charlotte. And then I would invite anybody on the 29th, having our annual Hanukkah in the Square celebration. It's always really big. It's in Marion Square. It's from 4 to 6 p.m. There'll be food and some kind of entertainment, I'm sure. Our organization always has a table out there along with others. But there'll be stuff for kids too, if anybody wants to bring their kids. And then on a more personal level, I just wanted to share that one of our local legislators, Representative Wendell Gilliard, lost his brother this past week. And so I just ask us all to keep his family in our prayers. I think their memorial service is happening right now, and I know that it was a big loss for his family. And I think he was a reverend. And anyway, one of 11 brothers and sisters in that family.
I'm bringing to the commission as individuals, this is not official, even though there was an action by city, this is involving the publication of the ratified 28th Amendment, which is the Equal Rights Amendment. There is a groundswell of advocates led at the national level by the League of Women Voters and the American Association of University Women, AAUW, have dedicated themselves over the last month since the election to urging President Biden to take the last step, which is really just a confirmation that the 28th Amendment has been fully and officially ratified by 38 states. And legal constitutional scholars say that means it is in the Constitution, but the last step is to publish it in the Federal Register. And the archivist in the 38th state, which was Virginia, in 2020 ratified it. The rule is that it's to go into effect 2 years after the last ratification date. And the archivist did not choose to publish it at that point in time because there was an ongoing controversy about whether the amendment was going to be actually established legally, because originally it had a timeline by which it needed to be ratified. And everyone now has gone back and forth and decided, there's precedent all in the favor of there is no timeline that actually deserves the attention and the cooperation of the archivist. When the amendments are ratified, they're published in the Federal Register. Then if there are opponents to the amendments being put into effect, then they're welcome to mount a legal campaign or whatever they want. But we're needing that last step, and President Biden is the sole authority to direct the archivist to publish the ratification of the 28th Amendment in the Federal Register before he leaves office on January 20th. So I have just a summary. You can look up ERA Coalition. It's a whole dedicated organization that's done nothing but this for years and years. But I took out a little excerpt of what the AAUW has been promoting, and then I wrote on there in my handwriting to contact President Biden as individuals to publish the 28th Amendment. And I've been making the call to the 202 White House switchboard. you're only allowed to call and actually speak with a volunteer operator on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. But they're very nice when they talk to you. And basically, I've always gotten women and I say, we don't understand, what the president is, what the holdup. And everyone that I've talked to says, yes, we appreciate that you don't understand. We don't either. So it really has become a very, I think, a more and more public advocacy campaign. So if you're moved, get your females, your males, call the president and tell him to take the last step to publish the ratified 28th Amendment. And I'm happy to read it if you haven't memorized it. Oh, yeah. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. 28th Amendment. Section 1. Yeah, I highly recommend their website. It's very informational. You can see all the states that have ratified it, which is mind-catching.
Anything, other comments for the good of the order? Yes, sir.
There are a lot of holidays coming up. I hope whichever one you're celebrating is happy and joyous.
Absolutely. Hope, peace, joy, and love to all. With that, we'll stand adjourned.